Next up, I'd like to introduce Luis Beltran, and he's going to be talking about how to essentially set yourself free from your servers and what it takes to set up a serverless environment capable of performing CRUD operations on a Cosmos DB account. So really excited to hear this talk, Luis.
Hello, Gar. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending where you are joining us. I hope that you are enjoying the Azure Cosmos DB Conf. So let's get started. So my name is Luis. I am a Microsoft MVP in AI and developer technologies. I am based in Czech Republic. I am currently pursuing my PhD at Tomás Bata University in Zlín. I am also lecturer at Tecnológico Nacional de México in Celaya, and along with some friends, we lead the community, Xamarin community in Spanish. You can find us on Facebook, and also Aprendiendo Azure, Learning Azure. Here you have my contact details in case you would be interested in talking about these topics. So let's get started. You have been learning a lot about Azure function, about Cosmos DB. So I will go directly to Azure functions. This is the classic model or hosting models that we have learned about the cloud. There are, if you have your on-premise environment, as long as you are going into infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, or software as a service, you are freeing up yourself with the responsibilities. So in software as a service, for instance, you don't have any responsibility. You just need maybe just a browser to start using an application such as Office 365 documents and so on. And if you provision some of these resources, for instance, a virtual machine, well, you are in infrastructure as a service, so you don't worry about the virtualization technologies. You won't worry about servers. You just go for the rest. You set up the operating system, the runtime, the data, your applications, and so on. So there is another model, which is serverless. And serverless basically means that you don't, you want to write code, you want to write applications, but you don't want to worry about provisioning a virtual machine or resources. So the cloud, Azure, will do that for you. So in this case, in this scenario, serverless, yes, you just worry, you just manage your functions, your code. The rest is already set up for you. And you can use your function, or you can integrate them in the other hosting models, even on premises, and of course infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. So Azure Functions basically works with events. You will write some code, and this code will trigger on when some events happen. So maybe you send an HTTP request. Maybe you want to execute some code according to some schedule every hour, every 10 hours, and so on. Maybe when your users upload a picture into blob storage, you want to execute some code for analysis or something else. So, okay, you set up an event, or you know about an event. Then you write your code. You have different options. You can write your code in C#, in Node.js, F#, and other languages. And what's one of the good advantages is that you can bind some input and output elements. So you can directly connect, for instance, to Cosmos DB, which is the main topic of today's session. You can also connect to blob storage service, table storage, or even you can send email to after some processing. So your code plus events is Azure Functions, basically. Well, as we have mentioned, Yes, there is full integration with Azure services. So basically, Event Grid will here will listen will react to some events that are happening. So, for instance, in databases in Cosmos DB, when one of the items, the documents, are modified, well, you can also catch that event. You can also integrate with other products such as cognitive services, stream analytics. It is actually a good idea to use Azure functions and integrate it with IoT solutions. And also, well, if you don't want to write code, there is also logic apps, which allows you to design workflows, what process will follow after some, let's say, events or after some interactions. And well, yes, there are several triggers. I mentioned a few of them. So HTTP trigger is when you send a request over HTTP, like, okay, post, put, or even get. There is also a timer. So you set up a cron, let's say a cron statement, and then it will execute every hour, every Monday at 7 a.m., every day 5th of every month. Yeah, you can set up that. So you run your code when the specified events happen. So this is the example. Maybe you have a mobile application. You take a photo, the users take a photo, they send it to the cloud. And it is stored in blob storage, for instance, and maybe you would like to create different versions of this picture. Maybe you want to create escalated versions, resize them. So in this case, you can automate this task by setting up an Azure function with an input, let's say, element, which is the blob storage, and also an output, because you want to create some files and store them maybe in a different container. Okay, so and actually, if you are wondering, okay, is this code hard? Is this code complicated? Well, the truth is that no, and this is because of the bindings. Because, well, you have your code. For instance, this is C# code. There is a CSX file, and you have your bindings. Your bindings are set. You have a designer. You can do it graphically. You can select and connect by using, let's say, a connection string or a parameter. But this information is stored in a function.json file. So you see that we have an image binding. It's an input. You see the direction. The second one is output direction. So this one is output binding. Then you have the path. Of course, the connection tells you, okay, I am using this blob storage element. Storage account. And in the storage account, there is a container. The container is card-input. And then the file name. This is the file that the user just uploaded. So these two elements, such as the name and the path, can be used as parameters of my function. So the byte image, of course, means the element that just came in, that was just inserted. And the string file name, of course, refers to the name of this blob. Then you have the same for the output parameter. Maybe I have output blob. Okay, that's the reference. That's the string where I want to save the file, and I want to use maybe the same file name, but as you can see, in different containers. They both use the same connection, and you can see the code is quite simple, just a few lines of code. You don't have to create like a client for connecting to your input blob storage and for the output blob storage. It's quite easy thanks to the bindings and the code, of course. What tools can you use to write Azure functions? Well, you can even do it in the portal, as that's the case that I'm going to demonstrate today. But you can also use Visual Studio, VS Code, the CLI, and some other deployment options. Actually, if you remember, in previous slide, we talked about the on-premises hosting model. You can have your serverless functions running in on-premises environment, so you don't even need to deploy them to the cloud. They can work, and you can even deploy them to containers. So what happens with Cosmos DB and Azure Functions? Well, with the native integration between Azure Cosmos DB and Azure Functions, there are different ways to interact between them. There are 3 ways: database triggers, input bindings, and output bindings, directly from your Azure Cosmos DB account. So this means that you can deploy, you can create serverless applications that are based or rely on events with low latency access to rich data for global user base. Yeah, basically Azure Cosmos DB. So yeah, there are 3 ways. The first one is you can create an Azure Functions triggers, which is event-driven, which relies on the change feed streams to monitor your container for changes. So when there are some changes made to the container, this change feed stream is sent to the trigger and thus invoking the Azure function. Actually, there is also another nice talk in this Cosmos DB Conf by Gabriela Martinez. She talked about the change feed, so I recommend you to watch that presentation. The second one is prepare the input binding. So you set up the connection for your Azure Cosmos DB, and you can use this element you will see with very few lines of code and retrieve the data that you have in your Cosmos DB. And yeah, that would be the input binding. It will read data from the container when the function executes. And the third case is bind a function to an Azure Cosmos container with the output binding. You will use this when you want to write data, for instance, when you want to insert a new element. Okay, so let's go for the demo. And just give me a second, please. I will bring my, yes, I will bring here my, I have already set up a Cosmos DB database, so an account. So you can see in this case, I have 3 members. Yes, I have this informatics management. Okay, yes, please. I have these 3 elements. So I would like to check the code. Okay, give me maybe I will set this a bit larger. Sorry about that. Yes. So we have our resource group, and I have already set up some Azure functions, which is here, university functions. So if I go to my functions, I will have this, for instance, these get students. All of them are HTTP triggers. And well, I first want you to look at the integration before looking at the code. So in this integration, I can easily add input or output bindings. In this case, it's a get student, so I want to read information from my database. So you can add an input, and when you add the input, you pick from the list. You have, as you can see, well, I cannot modify it, of course, but you have a blob trigger, you have Azure Cosmos DB. Then you set up some document parameter name. This, you will use it in your code. In this, my case, it's input document. That's the reference for the parameter. The database name is studentsdb. My collection name is students. And this is my connection that I created for my Cosmos DB. If I don't have it at the beginning, of course, I can create it. and it will detect. In this case, I have the Cosmos DB account in the same resource group. And I can set up document ID if I want to, and my partition key, which is optional, but it's nice to set it up from the beginning. So it's faculty. And that's it. Then look at the code, and it's quite simple. Well, first, I just need to, well, you don't need actually all these, all the namespaces, but I added them, but you don't need them. I just set my, let's say, my class student, which with the properties. And then you can see in the parameter, I just have the input document, which I mentioned earlier. I set this one as a list or enumerable of students. Then the code is quite simple. Convert maybe your input document into a list of students, and you can return it. That's it. Then we can test it. Azure Function provides a nice console to prepare a request, get, post. You can also use other tools such as Postman if you want. And that's it. I don't need to bring any parameters. I can leave it. So I will run this. And we will get the information here. So yeah, so you see, this is my data. It's already in very nice JSON style. So yeah, I have brought all my information from my database. That's it. Then you might wonder, okay, okay, so this is nice, it's in the portal, but how can I connect it to my application? Well, for functions. In this case, since it is an HTTP trigger, it means that it will only execute when I send a request. So there is get function URL. And in this case, I have this URL. I can maybe integrate it in my application, or I can check it in the browser, and you will see the data. So yeah, that's just it. It's the same. So yeah, now you know how to integrate it. What about some other operations? Well, in this case, I have also prepared add a student, which is this one. So it's more or less the same. In this case, I want to actually write information. So the first thing is, okay, I create my function. Then I go to integration. And in integration, I don't want input trigger. Now I want output. Sorry, not input binding, output binding. And you see that in this case, the output I have already set up an Azure Cosmos DB output document. And let's just briefly explore it. It's basically the same, but now it's an output element. So here we have the binding type, of course. This is the reference that I will use as parameter in my code. And the rest, you know it. Database name, collection name. I don't want to create the database, it already exists. And my connection and my partition key. That's it. Then the code, yeah, it's also simple. You will see. So, okay, yeah, the same. I have my class, and here I have the reference, my output document. It's an out parameter. Then, in this case, I need to provide the information. I need to send a post request with the information, yes, that I want to insert. Then so I get the body, I convert it, yes, I deserialize it, yes, and then I set the value for output document, new, and then I provide a bit of information that I will get from my post request, and that's it. As soon as you set up this and, of course, finish your code, it will be written to the Cosmos DB. So we can test it. So for this, I have already this value. Okay, I will change it. Let me put some other information. So faculty is technology. And let's go for, I don't know, some errors. So let's run it. Okay. Okay, so the response is 200. Yes, well, in this case, I didn't set a block. I just get a response. But I can go back here to my get students. And now I have 4 data. I have new elements. Okay. So, yeah. Then for update and delete, well, I have an issue there, so I will not show this. Well, it should work, but for some reason I am getting some error in deletes, but I can share this later in my GitHub repository. But yeah, it should be also, I see it's just some minor detail there. But of course, the idea here is that you create this very easily. As you can see, the code is quite short. You just you can set up in minutes. And well, yeah, also the same goes for this add student. There is also a function URL, which I have, well, okay, I clicked, but I shouldn't have. So yeah, just a second. I get different function URL. But of course, I cannot test this one directly here because I need to bring some information in the body, for instance. Okay, so but yeah, so that's why this one will not directly work here. So yeah, essentially that will be all. Yes, as I said, well, I will complete that part, the update and the delete, which is giving me some issue, but I will fix it. So the call to action, I share this couple of links. You can take a screenshot, or I can share the presentation later as well. There is serverless database computing with Azure Cosmos DB and Azure Functions. There is this link, and also the video that I referenced a bit earlier by Gabriela Martinez for the Azure Cosmos DB Conf, integrating Azure Cosmos DB with Azure Functions. So that will be all from me. Thank you very much for having me. Please, if you have any questions, I will do my best to answer them. Here you also have my contact details. So yeah, I'm up for questions. Back to you guys. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Luis, for a great presentation. You made it really clear how the complementary benefits of using Azure Cosmos DB and functions work together to really build powerful applications. That was really cool. One question we got in the chat was around performance. And what recommendations do you have for users who want to really leverage functions and Cosmos DB in terms of performance?
Yes, that's a good question. Thank you. Well, it is true that serverless has some requirements. Like, for instance, if your application does or your function doesn't get a request after 10 minutes, it goes, let's say, back to sleep. So next time that you bring it up, that you send another request, it will take some time to wake up and to execute your code. I have a small trick for that. I always keep the let's say the server running or the virtual machine running where the code is host. I also set a timer trigger that is executing every 9 minutes. So my server is always running. You might wonder, okay, but is this going to be a costly solution? Well, the truth is that Azure Functions has a micro billing, let's say, feature, which means that you only get billed by the time that your code is running. I mean, executed. Even if your code is always hosted there, you don't get billed as it would be for a virtual machine or for an app service. So, and the cost is, you can get maybe even less than $1 per month. So I think I have got good results. I mean, regarding performance, you can also create Azure functions instead of serverless. You can set it as an app service if you find that it's let's say slower or something. But so far, I don't have encountered any issues. I think it's a effective way to connect to your database with CRUD operations.
Great. So if I'm understanding correctly, it sounds like we're keeping the connection live so that you're always getting the most throughput possible.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
I have some more questions, unless Thea or Stephanie, if you have any other questions, I can follow up with some more.
No, go for it.
Cool. So one question that I actually personally was wondering what are the best examples that you would say for each of the three cases that you mentioned around measuring changes, input bindings, and output as well? Like what examples have you seen in the wild in terms of using that?
Yes. For instance, well, I have created a bot that is running in actually in let's say some channel. It's YouTube actually, and the idea there is that the users send a request and they let's say request music like, okay, this streaming plays some music. The user wants to listen to some song. So it actually uses Azure functions. I have a bot, and this bot calls these functions. The information is saved into a table API. It uses the table API of Cosmos DB and gets the information. Okay, this is your song. It will play next. I store it in a queue. Actually, I use a queue for that. So yeah, that's one example that I have been working on. I have also seen integrations with IoT solutions. So in this case, IoT devices generate a lot of information every second, every short period of time. So, and you might have distributed your devices in different regions, in different countries. So you can also send the information to the IoT hub and then process it with the Azure functions. Analyze your data, then store it in Cosmos DB, for instance. So yeah, that's another scenario that I have seen regarding this. Yeah.
That's really cool. Is this music app something you're planning on releasing, or is this just a side project for your?
It's a project for a friend. Actually, it is already running live. I can share the link later if you would be interested. It's actually for fun. I made it for fun. I was let's say I was a fan of this chat. I was interested. Okay, can I do it better? Can I learn? Actually, I learned a lot about functions, about integration with technologies by doing this. It was just by fun, and yeah, I think that's where you can get the most about technology. So yeah, it's already live actually. I will share the link with it.
That's a really great point. I feel like combining something you're passionate about something you want to learn more about, really allows you to learn and have fun while you're doing it. And obviously, we love when that involves Azure Cosmos DB, so I'm definitely going to mention that. But yeah, anyways, that's really cool, and it was really interesting to learn about Azure functions. So thank you so much for going through all of that and showing us more about that.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Luis. Awesome. It was a great session on functions and how to use them with Cosmos DB. So it looks like we're on time. So thank you again, Luis.